Welcome everyone on Let's Talk AI. On today's episode, we're talking with Adam Sroka. Could you define yourself with your own words, Adam?
Yeah, I normally start with former data scientist that I spent the last quite a few years now in sort of leadership management position, building and running data functions and data teams across quite a number of organizations, both internally as like a head of director or now as a consultant for lots of customers.
Awesome. And so I have two questions. You just built your own company, right?
hmm
Can you tell more about your own company and what is your goal? What is your mission today?
Yeah, so I've spent my career started in a really, really large organization doing research science, and that was great fun. But I didn't quite like the colossal organizations. I found they were quite sluggish and didn't really make it easy to get innovation done and get moving quickly,
Mhm.
right? So I then spent a lot of time, the rest of my career, in startups, like really early stage through to like sort of medium sized
Mm.
companies. And one thing I've kind of found, because of having been a consultant and having been working in these organizations and we're working our way through them, is that a lot of companies really, really struggle to get going with data and AI and machine learning and things like that. And the literature doesn't help, and the kind of community, I think the community is really good, but I think a lot of it's skewed towards organizations that are really quite late stage or high maturity organizations. So I started Hypercube off the back of that vision that I've built and scaled these teams several times now, and I know how to deliver successful projects. And can I enable more organizations to do that? And especially in the energy space. So my sort of a lot of my experience has been in the energy sector. So I'm now looking to, see if I can sort of help organizations start or master their kind of data and AI projects with the help of sort of outside third parties that have been there and done that. Because that's the thing, like you only build your first data team once, and unless you're a consultant, you won't have had the chance to do that more than once. So you don't know what a good start looks like. And I don't know. I think there's a lot of value in it, and a lot of our customers do as well. So it's quite fun.
Yeah.
So yeah, in short, data and AI consultancy services, preferably for the energy sector.
Awesome. And you mentioned something very, very interesting that I've always tried to get a closer look is like building a data team. Like, how do you build a great data team at the beginning? And then when the data team grows, like, how do you give responsibilities to manager that will take care of other teams? So could you give us more insight on this part?
Yeah, with great difficulty normally. I think there's one way definitely not to do it, which is the way most organisations go, right? Where they, from sort of 2015 onwards, they got on the hype train with data and AI and machine learning and all this, and they read the sexiest job of the 21st century article like everyone else did, and so they just think, right, we want to do data science or machine learning, so we'll hire a data scientist. And what typically happens in that scenario, and a lot of my writing's about, is that that person might be really, really good at model development or a really good like experimenter or researcher that knows machine learning and stats inside out, right? But they land in a company that hasn't got any data landscape with which to speak. Like all of the work is either trapped in Excel spreadsheets that are really heavily formatted and emailed around the building, or like on written on napkins in the cupboard and things like that. And you've got to go from that to something that provides robust, automated, or at least just clean data sets to this person. And so a few things can happen there. Either this specialist then becomes more of a generalist and might spend a lot of time learning that stuff on the job. They might get frustrated. They might love it, right? I loved it. I enjoyed doing it. That was kind of what happened to me. But they might get frustrated. They might end up leaving. They'll probably do it a bit slower and not as well as someone whose job it is to kind of do that plumbing bit and build the foundations anyway. So that seems to be a common story that's happened a lot. Now, when I've done it the other way around, like when I've been brought in to say, right, we need to start a data team, I always think like we'll cut to the end a little bit, but one of the most valuable or most difficult to acquire skills, I think, is probably the most valuable thing, is domain and context specific knowledge. So understanding like the legacy and the history of an organization or an industry, like markets, things like that, like why things are the way they are, right? That takes a long time to develop. That takes like expertise and experience. You can read a lot of that in books, but nothing quite like sitting there and doing the job. So the best way to shortcut that, I think, is to actually go, right, well, is there anyone in the organization that is keen to do this? Do they want to learn some data stuff? Do they want to, or are they like skill adjacent? Like maybe they already manage databases or something, but they want to go down that route and try and utilize the skills you already have. So like I always try to start there. If I have to hire one person or I only get budget for one person, 9 times out of 10, I'll pick a data engineer to go first, like quite a generalist data engineer, to just try and find things that are going to deliver value, that are like small, thin. I always talk about thin slices through the whole value stack, from ingestion through ETL, through storage, all the way to like analytics and reporting and modeling, right? Can we find a really thin end-to-end piece and automate that? And then can we add another data set? And then can we add another view, and so on and so forth? Because if you do it the other way around, if you start with machine learning, you kind of need all that stuff anyway, right? So you need to build all of that, and you build it in like a big thin tower, and then balance your machine learning on top of it, right? Well, why not build a pyramid, right? Why not actually build a nice strong base and start to layer in complexity as time goes on? And there are plenty of use cases in like huge organizations, I think, that like one good model can spell millions and millions in revenue and uplift, right? But those organizations don't tend to need this kind of help. They're kind of already there. They tend to be further along. There aren't that many like enterprise level organizations that haven't had these conversations for years already. For people starting out now, they're probably just dipping their toe in the water, and yeah, it can be dangerous, right? There's sharks. You can waste a lot of time and energy by going the wrong way and doing the wrong stuff, and ultimately frustrate and burn people out in the process. And the absolute worst outcome is like when you start, you get going a bit. It's difficult to get the buy-in, but you manage. Then it doesn't actually produce any results for 18 months because it's too difficult, or you've kind of started with the wrong skill set. And then everyone just goes, oh, this isn't for us. I'll just turn it all off. And then all that investment gets wasted. And then you've kind of seeded a culture of like, oh, we don't want to do this again. So for me, how do you start? 9 times out of 10, I'd say someone that's going to build a data platform and try and find quick wins to build confidence and start picking off the low-hanging fruit.
Okay, awesome. And so let's say now you have a small team working, you have some data engineers, maybe machine learning engineers that is doing some models, and you have these good teams going, but you want to take it next level. You want to go from having one team to manage multiple teams. How does one approach this moment where you can get all these responsibilities? Like how do you prepare for managing multiple teams, and how do you do this transition?
Yeah, now that's usually a challenge that's constrained by kind of budgets and headcount, right? So it's all about risk and trust, I think, right? So you think, and actually, if it goes right back to the career ladder, right? What's the difference between like an associate and a developer and a senior and a principal staff level person? Well, it's risk and trust, right? You should be able to trust a principal with a lot more ambiguity and a lot more kind of uncertainty and risk than you should a developer or an associate, right? And that's why developers and associates maybe need like little task level items, whereas you give like a whole subsystem architecture to your principals, right? So have you got budget to go and get another one of those people that knows your industry or your company inside out? Maybe not, right? Maybe you do. If you do, then potentially just plop in a new team and give them lots of time to embed and learn the ways of working and familiarity and so on and so forth. But what's more common is you don't have that. So is there a natural way to cleave the team, or is there perhaps a senior or a developer in the team already that can be trusted with a little bit more of that trust, that risk? And I think it's actually all right to like let someone early in their career start and do that, like give them that trust, as long as everyone's on board that's what's happening. like you all say, we are aware that this is maybe a stretch for you, so we don't anticipate 10 out of 10 results. We'll keep close checks and we'll try and find what's going on. And then it becomes the responsibility of whoever's managing the workload to really shoulder a lot of that burden. And in some organizations, that's your line manager, and that's like a senior person, a technical person in the team. In other organizations, that could be the project manager or the product owner, right? Depending on what kind of company you are. And I find that if you can, and it often leads to overworking that person a bit for a short period of time, but if you can have that person run both teams for a bit, you get a nice kind of homogenization of the ways of working and kind of expectations
Mhm.
and things like that.
Mhm.
But you'll get bottlenecks and you'll start to overwork people. So you do need to release them either by bringing in more people or lowering the workload, lowering the scope of what's being done, right?
Mm. Okay, very interesting. Thanks. Do you implement on a daily basis some agile method or Scrum methods to like manage uh, tech roles or business tasks? Do you have a process or a framework to like give what everyone needs to do and then everyone gives to their own teams?
Yeah, so I've used most of them, right? From being in a colossal research organization with like 45 people on the project team doing like real waterfall stuff with
Mm.
safety critical systems
Mhm.
in defense, right? All the way to super fast and loose, like startups with 6 people and it was chaos and pandemonium. So I've done like, I've tasted a lot of it.
Mm.
Um, I think Agile gets a bad rap in the data community because people immediately assume Scrum when you say Agile.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not a massive fan of Scrum.
Okay.
It can work, like it can totally work, and I've seen it work, and I've seen it be successful, and much brighter, much better leaders than I swear by it in data science, right? Um, I think, so the way I've made it work, I was sort of copied someone, Elizabeth Hollinger, who's head of, well, no, she's director of data analytics for Greco now. I think she talked years and years and years ago about how they quite heavily used it, and they just make some adjustments and tweaks to it. And I think the main takeaway for me was to relax some of the story pointing stuff and go more towards heavily leaning on spikes and like time boxed stuff, and then accepting that like the output of a sprint might just be a report saying we've tried these avenues and nothing's been done, right? So that's like one kind of tweak of traditional like by the book Scrum that I think works. But preferably I'd much prefer Kanban, sorry. And I'm actually writing a load of stuff on this at the moment, like how I think it's beneficial, because so I've used like Crisp DM and like the team data science process and some of these ones that are like specific. There's a Domino one I've not tried. There's like a few project management delivery methods that are specific to data science. And I just think that they probably work and they're good. Like they're a bit complicated and it feels a little bit like shoehorning. But for me, I believe quite strongly in interdisciplinary teams, right? So sometimes like those methodologies are going to be a new thing to learn for like software engineers or other adjacent supporting roles. So I think if you like grow up in a CRISP-DM environment and then you land in a Scrum place or something a bit different, like you've got another learning thing to go through. Whereas I think Kanban just applies nicely across the board. It gives you that flexibility in time. The big challenge with like Kanban when you're not doing like Scrumban is sort of certainty of deliverables and things like that, and you get into these horrible like hybrid agile sort of waterfall things. Um, I think you can unravel a lot of that by involving the stakeholders more. So instead of saying like, okay, we'll deliver this in X time by X date, blah blah blah, you just have a regular cadence of these are the deliverables and the expectations, and like as and when things change, report on it. I'm not a fan of recurring meetings and like meetings for meeting's sake. So I think minimum meetings possible to make the system work, but maximum visibility. And whether that's like recording things now, tools like Loom are brilliant, right? I've started using it all the time just to record like if I know a meeting's going to be me broadcasting something to someone, I'll just record it and say, right, there's a link, go and watch it as and when you need. Share it. That's such a time saver compared to like, well, we'll just stick 90 minutes in the calendar every week just in case we need it, and so on and so forth. Although I don't agree, that's not the same for actually managing individuals. That's separate. I think you do need to put in box time for that.
Okay.
So yeah,
Yeah,
I
it's a
think that's
it's a,
probably
it's a very wide question, but thanks. I really enjoy the answer, and it gives a lot of directions for one to explore those types of management, and I feel it depends really on what project is being developed. So I would really like to ask you about the overview. Well, I want to ask you about your experience, your journey as being a leader and managing. Like, how do you feel that you've been evolving? But just before asking you about that, I would like to know what kind of framework do you apply for yourself to like manage your business tasks, your technical tasks, your meeting with the people, and then you will have the strategy of how you will work with the team. But like, how do you apply this framework for yourself in the first place?
Yeah, so I've always been like a furious note taker. Like I honestly, I think I can write like between 6 and 10,000 words of notes a day. Like I really write. Like most meetings, I'm writing the whole way through, like writing down everything, and I don't even look up half of it. But I just I'm a big fan of that. It took me a long time to get to using digital notebooks because I couldn't get away from paper. I obviously didn't write as much back then, but Obsidian was the one for me. I'm being forced to use Notion at the moment, and it's not. It's my heart lives with Obsidian, I think. But so take a load of notes, and then I've also always been like one for systematizing and processing things, like building systems and processes that work for me and like refining them. So yeah, how do I go about? Well, in the way I take notes, I have like inline to dos and things like that, and I can look them up now. And I actually had a paper based system that allowed me to look them up, but now I can do that in Obsidian. That's really easy. And then I do use Kanban for my own stuff. And actually, so I have one great big Kanban board to rule them all that's got my whole business, all my content creation stuff, all my home stuff, and so on, family life stuff. Like everything lives in there with filters and so on and so forth. I'm a huge believer in that model because it allows me to prioritize, estimate, and kind of just see what's going on and where things are. But I would say though, one thing that I actually did it today because there's a new team starting today, and as the manager, as the leader, I think you do need to constantly test yourself and like try other ideas out, right? And it's almost the burden is almost on you to be subject to the management system, not enforce it. So by that I mean like I like the way I work and my systems, but I'll offer them as almost like a straw man to say, right, well, this works for me. Do you hate it? Is there something that works for you as a team? What would you rather? And there was an idea from playing Dungeons and Dragons called the same page tool, and it's all about making sure everyone in the group wants to play the same kind of game. Like, do you want to play like a Scooby Doo silly, like charging around kind of high fantasy a bit like thing, or do you want to play like Game of Thrones gritty, real, blah blah blah? Because if I want one and you want the other, we're not going to have fun trying to all like find each other's game in the same group. And it's a cool idea that I've adjusted for teams, right? And I do this as like sets of questions of like, what project management methods do you like? Do you prefer evening or afternoon, or morning or afternoon meetings? Do you like regular meetings? Do you not like them? So on and so forth. And by doing that sort of pseudo anonymously with a team, and then getting answers together and bring it to, like through, you'll find sometimes you end up running teams of people that want loads of touch points, loads of collaboration time. They want like really regular meetings and all that. For me to then go, well, I don't like meetings and I want them in the afternoon and we're using Kanban, I don't think that's the best way to serve that team, right? So yeah, I like Kanban. I kind of use it for everything, and that allows me to cascade tasks and things like that, and then high visibility, but whatever works and whatever the people want to use, like in the team. Because you might find actually it's been a while since you've done something a certain way, and
Yeah,
you've changed, right?
yeah,
Because
yeah, yeah.
you're always good. Well.
Okay, awesome. And would you consider, for example, having one team with managing one team with one method and another team with another method, and in the end it works, or do you try to kind of get the point of view of everyone and adapt the method for everyone?
Um, yeah, I think that can be done, but it's probably beyond my level of intelligence. I've worked with really good like project managers that can do that. Like run different teams of consultants, completely different models, and sometimes in a consultancy, you have to just slot into what the customer delivery method is. So like you get no choice at
Yeah.
all. And if you're working with multiple customers at the same time, then you end up stuffed a little bit. Um, I would say, if possible, like allow one person to kind of do things their way. So like whether that's the product owner or the PM or the team lead, and don't try and, unless they're skilled or they want to learn that, like don't try and make them do it both ways. I don't think it's overly harmful. I just think it's like a lot of cognitive load.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. Cognitive load is one of the most important thing I feel with all those methods. We try different things, and what ends up being good is what's the most efficient with less of cognitive load.
Yeah.
Awesome.
It's like I've worked with a really good PMs that like their method of managing the project is just speaking to people. And that's it. Like they don't really have much in the way of frameworks and systems, and they get stuff delivered on time because they're able to have really good personal relationships in really collaborative
Mm,
environments. Now I know other PMs and myself that just wouldn't work for. I couldn't do that.
mm. Yeah, and I feel like having methods like meeting with the stakeholders every week, meeting with the team, having like dailies and not just on the dev. I feel like it's like making sure everyone have what they need and make sure they share their doubts. And I feel like those methods. I mean, you have yeah. I feel like this is the safer, the easiest way to like be organized and have less cognitive load because you know you will connect and they will share their depths with you.
Yeah, and like just revise and test stuff, right? Test it for and just put. So we set up this new team today. All these systems are right. We're going to do this. Did the same page thing, great. And then we went right. Well, I'm only sticking 3 weeks worth of the kind of meeting cadence in
Mm,
because I want to review everything and make sure we're happy with these definitions and what we said we were going to do,
mm,
and whether or not it doesn't play out like that.
mm.
Like,
All right. So I have one last question regarding this management question and leadership questions. How would you describe your journey on being a leader? And how have you seen yourself evolve through times and maybe some key lessons? Yeah.
mhm. Yeah, well, it started off very badly. That's all I'd say. I kind of joke about it in bits, but it was very painful, the transition. I kind of was catapulted from a senior role to like senior developer or a data scientist role to director for a really fast growing private equity backed consultancy startup. So like private equity is hard, like fast growth is hard, consultancy is hard, and so it was a tough environment to be in. And I got given a business unit, which meant going from doing like machine learning and modeling and stats all the time to talking about HR issues and like budgets for finances and sales and marketing and all this stuff. So I had to learn all that. And at the same time, I went from never having managed anyone in this career. I used to run bars years ago, which was very, very different. But never having properly managed anyone to having team and actually growing that team to quite a significant number of heads. And I lost friends over it, right? So I started off thinking for a few reasons. And I think my kind of number one, and it's only recent, I've started talking more about this because I think I've only just recently realized it. Like the number one cause of a lot of pain in teams and organizations and like manager sort of report relationships is expectations, and it's like not having absolute crystal clear expectations, like in black and white. What do you actually want me to do, and when and how, and what do I want from you, and so on and so forth. I think we leave a lot of stuff unsaid and or just assume things, and that can cause issues. Like maybe your manager wants you to email them a report at the end of the week, but hasn't really ever articulated that to you, or they just expect it because other people do it, and we just let it sit, and or stuff gets said a certain way, and so on and so forth. So I didn't set expectations very well, which caused issues. I think I gave a lot of freedom, like loads of freedom, and I was really concerned with like people being like liking me and being my friend. So I wanted to be everyone's friend first and manager second. And I actually don't advise that these days. I think like it's nice if you can be friends with the people you work with, but I think it's dangerous to like have to be friends with people you work with. It's nice if you can, but first and foremost, you are professional colleagues. Like you're on a team to do a job, and that comes above everything else. And it's great. Like it's super important to develop personal relationships, but there is a slight sort of ranking and priority order there. So another thing about the expectations was then I just assumed everyone would be like me and work like me, and I was a workaholic and all that. And when that didn't come to pass, like that caused frustration. And I look back now and I think, well, I never told anyone that either. Like I just expected people to be like me, but I didn't tell them that. And then I got frustrated when they weren't. So really stupid. And I lost friends over it, right? People that I was friends with at really difficult times, and yeah, it went to a bit of a dark, bad place. And I've done a lot of self-reflection, a lot of work. Like I've basically read nothing but management leadership books for the last like 4 or 5 years now to try and get better and better at it. I've been through therapy, still am, because I think that's important to like figure out what inside me makes me a good, bad manager, leader. I have a mentor. Like I really worked on this a lot over the last few years. And so things did turn around though. Like it wasn't all doom and gloom. Like that was the first sort of 6 to 9 months. And then I started listening more to my like superiors and just copied people that were already good at it. So there was another manager in the organization that everyone loved. So I just copied what he did. And actually, lo and behold, I started getting results like he did. So that kind of fake it till you make it. Not quite understanding why they were working at first. And then I've gone on to lead lots of teams and go to actually that point around. I think one of the most valuable things you can then do as a manager, and again, let's go back to trust and risk, right? Is more trust is like you are dealing with humans, and I think that kind of comes out in the wash a little bit sometimes. Like they're not work units or human resources. Such a horrible term, resource, but there's not really any better ones, right? But you're dealing with humans, so one thing I've found is make lots of time and like carve time out, and you want to bank almost like trust points, right? Trust tokens, and you actually get them from weird places. Like one of the big detrimental things I think about remote work, because I love the office and I do miss it, but it is absolutely necessary, right? So you have to have remote work, but I think we've lost a lot of that opportunity to earn those little trust points, like. When you just overhear someone watch the same Netflix thing as you last night and they hated it and you loved it and you can have a discussion about it and all that, like you're building up like, oh, this is actually another person, and like opportunities to be nice to people and just bond with them as a person. Then when stuff gets difficult or like challenging, it's not just like manager to report, like do the thing. It's a human asking of like someone that's built a relationship with, right, here we are, and you kind of know and you trust each other a bit more. So yeah, I think as I've gone on, realizing that the human, that kind of relationship element is really, really important, but I still stand by not to be their friend, just to be there and be able to connect with them on that kind of level. And because ultimately people don't want to do a bad job, right? If someone's doing a bad job, find out why, like, and just ask them and be open about it and talk about mental health with them and talk about like their performance and the expectations, and figure out where the mismatch is, and it becomes so much easier.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, that made me think of one specific scenario. So, for example, if you see if you have this person in your team, and you're coming to this person, mm, trying to understand, opening about what have been like the result of the work, and why is it like that, why doesn't it match expectation, maybe after redefining expectation and seeing the same result, and you're not very happy, and you talk about mental health with this person, and you're still seeing um, you're still not seeing the output you would like to have, like you would hope for. How do you approach this specific situation?
Yeah, this is the absolute terrible side of like being a manager, right? Sometimes you have to manage people's performance and you have to bring them back in line with what you expect from employees of their level or whatever. And yes, you do have to give people leeway for mental health and things like that, but you at the same time, again, they are there to do a job, and it is a professional relationship first. So when that happens, right, I go down a more increasingly rigid, like ever increasingly rigid structure until you get to a point. And it came from my CEO in that job as director was like he had like systems to deliver certain parts of the business, and I didn't agree with some of them. And he said, "Look, Adam, when if you're hitting your number, like your target month in month out, you can tell me to go away. But the second you stop hitting target and you're not doing the systems, I'll be knocking your door down." And I was like, that's a nice. So for me, it's that again, that similar journey. I'll give you all the freedom I can until that performance slips, and I'll communicate that with you, and I'll let you know, and make sure that we have regular one-to-ones anyway. So in that, I'll start to say, right, well, I think people are sensing there's a bit of slip. What's going on? Let's try and improve this. Let's see if we can get some more positive comments this week. Blah blah blah. And if that just continues to decline and there's no real reason, then you get to, especially in the UK, like you can't just fire people, right? So you have to give them the opportunity to improve, and you put them on a performance improvement plan. And now that's kind of a wishy-washy, like it's a legal thing, but it gets used in a bit of a wishy-washy way. And it basically means you're sacked in a lot of places, but you can run them really successfully and turn people into superstars using them if you do them well. And so with that, I think, well, you have to, the last stage of that framework is saying, right, I need absolute like contract, like black and white things that must be achieved that I can measure in certain time frames to say, actually, you've made the improvement. And so I just go down that route and I say, right, well, you're on a 6 week performance improvement plan, and I need you to achieve. And just think about, well, what does this role do, and what do people that are performing in this role do? And that's hard sometimes because roles can be quite fluid things. But say, like, look at again what was expected of the role, and if it's changed a lot over time or the environment's changed, that can be difficult. But go, if they were doing A, B, C, 1, 2, 3 in month after month or week after week, or even just in the next 6 weeks, then that's them doing an okay job, right? And then you say, well, what's the measurable? And I talk a lot about artifacts at work, and like I want like an item that I can point at forever. And it's almost like building up a bank of evidence. So I want like documents, or I want testimonials, or I want like presentations given, things that are like tangibles that I can point at to say, well, that proves that you did that item B on the list, which was part of the 6 things that we said you needed to do to improve. And then you just stick timeframes on it. And so that takes something that's like, oh, what do you do about performance? You just turn it into a game almost. You just say, right, well, if you complete these 6 quest objectives, you'll pass the quest and you'll win. And then it gives you something absolutely concrete if it goes the other way, to say, well, look, it's in black and white here. You signed it, I signed it. And a big part of that as well is you have to do that collaboratively with the person. And you have to be a bit forceful sometimes and say, no, these are on the list, but you have to get them to sign off to say, well, that's a reasonable thing to do within the next 6 weeks. Like, you've not added a load of unfair stuff on there. And then you're on that journey together, right? And then it's about doing everything in your power as a manager to make sure they pass everything, right? Try and doing the work for them, but putting every kind of advantage in front of them, knocking down all the obstacles so that they can prove that they want to keep the job. And maybe they don't, right? And that's fine. But you can't then be guilty of like not giving them the best chance.
Okay, thanks a lot for all those insights of managing. um, I hope it helps a lot of person, at least it helps me. um, so you mentioned different things that I wanted to get back on. You mentioned that you were managing bars. You mentioned, if I heard correctly, some role play games. like
Yeah.
the Dungeons and Dragons. Um, uh, could you talk maybe a bit about like yourself, who you are, and like how your passions and your interests affects your work?
Yeah, definitely. Uber nerd, I would say. Like, I've always been really nerdy ever since I was really young. Like, didn't play football in the playground. We used to play pretend up until I was like 18. Like, really, really nerdy. Um, I yeah. So I once upon a time, I did chemistry as an undergrad, and I didn't really enjoy it. And when I finished, I was well into like running bars, and I loved like the bar scene in Manchester. I got into like being a competition bartender, traveled around Europe, like doing that. That was great fun. And then essentially I said to myself one day, I was all right, but I wasn't so good that I was ever going to make loads of money off it. And I thought I'm never going to own a bar by working in one. So I need to get a proper job. So I only do this so that one day I can retire and own a bar, which is a kind of an ongoing joke with my wife that she won't let me. But I wanted to get back into like an actual career, and I went back to uni and all that. So, but I think one of the things that kind of made me quite unique in where I ended up, like in data science, like research degree, did the doctorate and all that, was that bar work gave me a lot of ability to have conversations with random people, like just instantly, like easy to connect with people, and just getting the reps in, getting all that practice in, and like trying to. It sounds really silly, but like trying to get clear instructions or like set expectations with someone that's drunk, right? Like someone trying to figure out what do you mean, and yeah, sorry that we don't do that, or dealing with emotional people and all that stuff. And they like is useful because then you take that into a work environment where people hopefully aren't drunk, but you go into like the office and people don't really know what they mean, or they don't know what they want. So like I work at a cocktail bar, 150 cocktails on the menu, right? And people come in and they go, oh, what drinks do you do? We're like, well, what drinks don't we do? Like, and they haven't got the time to actually go through the menu. They just kind of don't really know what they want, and you have to help guide them. So I thought that was a good practice, and I encourage anyone that's in like that's early career data science, maybe still at uni, to try and work in a bar because it's good fun and you'll meet good people. Then yeah, role play games outside of like work stuff. That was still work. Yeah, got into playing Dungeons and Dragons and things like that, and it kind of changed who I was. Like when I did that as a teenager, I was really really shy, couldn't speak to anyone, like really reserved, and then and quite unhappy for a lot of my teenage years. And then I started doing like role play games, and this is like really sad, but I realized that I could kind of pretend to be someone else so, and then if they didn't like that person, that was fine. So because it wasn't me, that was like a character, and I've slowly just become that character. Like that is who I am because I could be a little bit more bold and ambitious and outgoing, and I had that shield of like pretend, and that has helped me come out my shell and be more like. Well, I'm a bit of a loudmouth now. You can't shut me up a lot of the time, as evidenced by this podcast and my rambling, right? But the roleplay is really really interesting. If you've never done tabletop roleplay, try and find a good like group locally to try and do a one-off or something, because only through doing years of it, like where you're pretending to be a character and you're pretending to be in the mindset of like another situation, and you're trying to read like cues and clues, that ability to role play actually really helps with like your empathy and your understanding of the perspective of other people. And I do genuinely believe this, like it sounds nuts sometimes, but I think that being able to like pretend you're a dwarf, like Smith or whatever, and like you've got to do such and such, like it's so alien, but it's like again it's getting the reps in. It's that mental gymnastics of trying to contemplate, well, what would that person feel like, not what do I feel like, what would that character feel like, and how does that work. And then it allows you to like off the cuff talk as well, much like bartending. You can just talk about things, and because it's essentially loads of improvisation over and over. So it practices your communication skills, enables you to kind of talk more confidently and be better in group environments. It also teaches you things like teamwork, some of them, and all sorts. So that's kind of two of the most formative things that I think have really helped my data science sort of life as well. I also like the board games there behind me. I play a lot of tabletop board games. I play like computer games as well. That's mainly because I had no friends when I was growing up, right? But that, I think, like, I'd love it if my kids play computer games. I do think it helped me learn a problem solving mindset and things like that, and learn to like fail over and over and over again until you kind of stuff starts to click. And there was a lot of controversial kind of takes on that when we were younger, but I think that's changing now. I'm not sure. There's a sense in the air.
Mm. Yeah, I think. Yeah, I'm not sure. Depends on the parents. Um, awesome. Well, thanks. I feel like, yeah, this background is unique, and what you mentioned, maybe like working on this competence to uh, look at someone or imagine a role and try to enhance the key characters of this person. I think that can really help. You were earlier mentioning like your CEO was doing something that he was good at, and so you kind of copy his model. Well, this gymnastic of
Yeah.
copying others when we're not sure how to do it, this is exactly what you're doing when you're doing these kind of games. Also, it's like being able to get out of your own head and to start thinking as you would assume someone else would be thinking. And I feel that this is a great trick sometimes in life to like achieve something. Just, okay, how would this person that is very good at this would do this? And then you kind of start breaking down some
Yeah.
key points and that you wouldn't think on your own. But now that you're changing your framework of looking at things, it works better and it can enhance more value. Um,
And it's like, so you're working with, say you're working with like a consultant, you're working with a customer, and you say, right, you need to do these three things, and then everything will be flying, and we'll be printing money, blah blah blah. And then they don't do them. Like, one person doesn't do the thing, and a lot of people's immediate response is, well, they're an idiot, right? Well, they're stupid, and they're wrong, right? And that might be true, right? But it's usually more helpful to go, right, well, stop. Let's just play the week out. It was a week since we told them that. What was their week like? What happened? What would have to happen to my character for me to come into that meeting and say I didn't do it? Like, and that can be a really helpful tool, because especially in like a sort of like provider customer relationship, if you can then like empathize with them and kind of play it back from their point of view with them, they just instantly feel like much closer to you. They get that you understand them, and it helps build that relationship. It might be that they're an idiot, right? But sometimes I find that that's quite a useful tool as well, being able to just play, right, look, how do I go from the state he was in or they were in to the state they're in now? How do I go through those steps?
yeah, yeah, totally. No, that's. I feel like this is very. It can enhance a lot of value. So maybe I have one other question that is maybe on the personal side, but a very interesting one, and I think a lot of people, yeah, should think like that. So you are recently a father, right?
Yep.
How do you manage, because you also recently launched your own company?
Yeah, I don't know.
How do you manage this? Like, do you have a framework? Do you have a method? How is it going? Do you have tips, frameworks?
um, very lucky that my wife's very supportive of everything that we do, right? So really, really lucky that she is on board with it all, and she understands that I've always wanted to start my own business, and the kind of the natural time came very recently. Um, all other things aside, if I hadn't had a brand new family, like basically my first daughter, just over a year ago, then it would have been a perfect time. And so I did it because that's kind of been burning at the back of my heart for like best part of a decade, right? So that had to happen eventually, and it just made sense to happen then. So she's on board and she gets it. So like tonight, right? I literally got home from a customer, got through the door, ate dinner, and came up here to do the podcast, right? And I can hear them in the background through there, like she's putting her to bed and things like that. And so like I've missed my duties really there. So that's like a big pillar of it. But that being said, like I do as much as I possibly can. So I typically try and do the mornings. I try and make sure I'm up really, really early, and I can get my daughter up out of bed, and I try and do a breakfast if I can, and things like that. Um, and it's about trying to just ruthless prioritization is a big one as well. Like I think a lot of us don't have time to do stuff because we just do all the stuff that we think we have to do, and actually you don't have to do the vast majority of stuff that you think you have to do. You can, if you really look like what's the crux of it, where's the real value, you can carve a lot of time out for yourself and things like that. And then yeah, multitasking, things like that, things like reading and writing all my LinkedIn stuff on the commute and so on and so forth, trying to find those kind of short tactics that help as well. Yeah, I don't know if I've got any advice really. It's difficult. It's really, really difficult. It helps that I've never really slept much either, and I think that's probably come. I get by in about 5 or 6 hours, but that's not really much of a
Yeah.
sort of tip for anyone.
Mm.
No, it is really difficult, and I respect to people that do it, and especially having to like take care of children that are maybe a bit older, as through lockdown and stuff like that. And I can imagine that was really, really, really tough, but
Mm.
it takes a lot.
Yeah. No, but I think you've shared some great insights, like talking and the communication being clear with in the relationship, so that you can be doing this, and then while you're prioritizing the tasks you have for the work, you also do some tasks for home, and like you manage your time for both, and you prioritize in both, and then go with the flow.
Yeah.
Okay, this is what I will take from this. Awesome. We're reaching kind of the end of the interview. I have a few follow up questions to maybe get more insights from you. So one is, how do you keep learning and be curious? How do you keep growing and learning things?
Yeah, I think that's really hard. Like, as especially now that my time is stretched more than it ever has been. Um, I'm worried that that will slip a bit because something has to give, right? I am a big relier on audiobooks or getting the audio, converting stuff to audio to listen to it, even if it's technical. And sometimes it's, if you've ever tried to listen to a really techie audiobook, it's really tough, especially if it's like an auto-generated audio thing. But that I think is a nice way to get like a first pass at least of like a text so that you can go, right, I know there's stuff in there that I need to study and so on and so forth. But I just think it's like such an important part of the game. Like you must learn at all times. Like the stuff I knew a few years ago is irrelevant, and like you have to keep up to date, you have to keep going. I find that through writing on, so a lot of people that might know of me will do so because of my writing online. And I think that is a really good teacher because, like, if I'm going to write, or a lot of us have these ideas or thoughts or things we think, right? And then but you've never actually formalized them. And writing them down makes you go, wait a minute, I've never actually thought that through. And I need to crystallize it a bit better and make sure it all makes sense. That can be a really good teacher. And then by reaching out to people and putting yourself out there online, you'll get challenged on stuff, right? Or you'll meet experts that agree or whatever. But either will teach you a hell of a lot. Like there's no better way to get good ideas and thought processes into your mind than speaking to someone that's been through the hard yards and done it and tells you why it doesn't work or why it does work and so on and so forth. And sometimes like I'll say stuff and I'll get challenged by people, and sometimes I'm right and I get better at defending my position. Oftentimes though I'm wrong, and I realize, oh, what I was saying wasn't quite right, and my mental model needs to adapt to the way things are. So I think it's almost that like because you've committed to saying something online, like I write every day, I have to learn stuff to make that worthwhile reading. Otherwise, it's not. So you just kind of force yourself to do it. But getting the time and doing it, yeah, that is just. I think that's half the game, really.
All right, great. If people would like to connect with you or see your work, your publications, where do they need to look? How can they learn more from you?
Yeah. So I write daily on LinkedIn, sometimes on Twitter as well. I kind of have a in-out relationship with Twitter, but yeah, LinkedIn's probably where I'm most active most days. Otherwise, I also write longer form stuff on like a weekly newsletter called Beyond Data, and that's just at newsletter.adamsroka.co.uk. That's free. Yeah, it always will be free. That's just me sort of expanding on some of the stuff that I write about on LinkedIn, really. But yeah, just reach out, just ping me a message or email me or whatever, and I'll try and make time and see if I can help. Or if I can't help you, I'll try and point you at someone that can, is a big thing. Contemplating starting a community, I think that's a lot more work than I've got time for, though. But if anyone wants to run a community with me, let's have a chat. But yeah, otherwise, open to suggestions.
Awesome. I'll put everything you mentioned in the newsletter, your LinkedIn and your Twitter account. I will put it in the description of the podcast. And last, yes.
I just forgot. I should, because I've literally just written a course on running and managing data teams
Okay.
that is to be released soon. So I haven't got any details of where it will be released, but watch this space for that as well.
Awesome. Great. We'll be connected. And last question, do you have any message for the data AI community or more in general or about leadership? Do you have a message to share?
Um, yeah, probably something I said the other day. Actually, people underestimate the value of management versus leadership. Actually, and I think it's important to be a good leader, right? But it's it's as important to have a good manager as well. It, and I said it the other day as the leader is the person there to like set the vision and get people enthused and like sort of carve the path, but the manager is the person that allows people to follow, like, and gets the best out of them and things like that. And I think people boohoo managers a lot, but it's difficult. And if you're looking for a career progression, do seriously consider, like, do you want to manage other people, because it's hard and a lot of techies don't, and I can see why.
Awesome. Thanks. Well, thanks a lot, Adam, for coming on the podcast. I learned a lot with you today, and I hope all the people listening learned as much as I did. I wish you all the best. We'll be pending on your newsletter and your following content, and maybe see you on another episode. And all the best with your new company.
Excellent. No, thanks very much. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks.